Imagine discovering that everything you believed about relationships, desire, and power was only half the truth. What if beneath centuries of social conditioning, there lay a hidden layer of influence so subtle, yet so decisive, that most never even glimpse it? And what if Socrates himself hinted at it, a wisdom about the feminine that society has long feared to confront? This is not a casual philosophical debate. It is the kind of inquiry that shakes the foundations of how we see others and ourselves. It begins with one of the most dangerous questions ever asked. What do women truly desire, and what role does power play in their silence? Socrates never left behind a single book, yet his voice still shapes the soul of Western thought. He walked barefoot through Athens, questioning poets, politicians, and citizens alike. But there was one subject even more treacherous than theology or politics: the nature of women, the reality of desire, and the power women hold, often invisibly. His own wife, Xantippe, was described as sharp-tongued and unyielding, a constant challenger. Many dismissed her as troublesome. But think, why would a man devoted to truth live with such a woman unless he believed there was something essential to be learned from her? Socrates recognized a reality others denied, that beneath a society demanding female silence, women carried immense power, emotional, psychological, and social influence that reshaped the world without ever announcing itself. Here lies the paradox. In public, women of Athens were expected to be quiet, modest, and obedient. But in private, within family, intimacy, and the shaping of sons and warriors, they held dominion. It was not the power of force but of influence, subtle, strategic, profound. And what if this same dynamic still operates today? What if feminine power works quietly in modern life, shaping decisions, relationships, and identities while remaining unnamed? Carl Jung would later echo this truth. He spoke of the unconscious feminine within every man's psyche, an inner force that inspires, confuses, seduces, and completes him. But if left unacknowledged, it does not vanish. It governs from the shadows. So ask yourself, when this inner feminine collides with real women, are we truly relating to people, or merely to projections of our own unconscious? Are we aware of their influence or dancing to strings we refuse to see? Most men never ask these questions. And that is why they remain trapped in cycles of attraction, confusion, resentment, and longing. As Alain de Botton observed, we fall in love not with those who are right for us, but with those who feel familiar. And that familiarity often comes not from truth, but from what is missing or unresolved within ourselves. This is where Socrates becomes dangerous. He forces us to examine not just appearances but essence. Not just what women want, but what we assume about them that blinds us from truth. When applied to the feminine, the question becomes radical. What truly attracts us, and what illusions are we projecting onto them? Simone de Beauvoir wrote, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." This becoming happens within a system that rewards silence and punishes defiance. But silence, as history shows, is not absence, it is strategy. It preserves influence by cloaking it, and this strategy, whether conscious or unconscious, has shaped human dynamics for centuries. Carl Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Most men live out scripts inherited from culture, media, and broken role models. Scripts that tell them to dominate, pursue, and perform, but never to understand. In such a world, women are reduced to symbols, ideals, or threats. But the feminine, in its true form, is not a puzzle to solve. It is a force, emotional, intuitive, symbolic, whose influence is deeper than logic and whose silence speaks louder than words. Socrates would not have offered a neat answer to the question, "What do women want?" Instead, he would have stripped away illusions until the question itself dissolved. Perhaps women do not seek men who claim to know, but men who are willing to see, to listen, to engage the mystery without fear. And here lies the challenge. To see requires risk. The risk of losing certainty, the risk of confronting your own desires, the risk of discovering how much of your attraction is shaped by wounds and projections rather than truth. But if we have the courage to face this, something shifts. Relationships stop being battles for control or stages for performance. They become spaces of awakening. Spaces where the feminine is not silenced, not idolized, not reduced, but honored as the force that calls us to become more than we are. When we fall in love, we like to believe we are seeing another person clearly. We imagine that our attraction is rooted in who they are, their character, their spirit, their essence. But more often than not, what we truly fall in love with is not them. It is our own shadow projected onto their face. Carl Jung explained this with brutal clarity. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Desire feels like fate because it is driven by the unseen. We think we have found the missing piece of our soul in another, but in reality, we have only stumbled across the mirror that reflects what we have buried within ourselves. Socrates, though he never spoke of psychology in modern terms, hinted at this same truth. His dialogues were filled with the relentless stripping away of illusions. Applied to love, the Socratic method reveals that what we call passion is often projection. We assign to others the beauty, strength, or mystery we cannot yet recognize in ourselves. Nietzsche once remarked, "We love life not because we are used to living, but because we are used to loving." And what is love, if not the projection of our deepest longings onto the world? We do not simply love people, we love what they awaken in us. We love the parts of ourselves that finally feel seen, even if it is an illusion. This is why desire is so intoxicating. It does not arise from the other, but from within. The person becomes a canvas, and onto it we paint our fears of abandonment, our hunger for safety, our longing for transcendence. The obsession is not with them, but with the story we tell ourselves about them. Carl Jung warned of this danger. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But transformation can be genuine only if we see each other as we are, not as projections. When love is built on shadow, the transformation is false. It is only a reshuffling of illusions. Think of how often relationships collapse under the weight of unmet expectations. At first, the other feels like salvation. They complete us, inspire us, lift us. But over time, reality emerges. The illusion cracks and we are left with a person, flawed, limited, human. Disappointment sets in, not because they changed, but because the projection fades. Simone de Beauvoir understood this clearly when she wrote, "In itself a woman is nothing. It is man who defines her." Her words expose the brutal reality. Too often, women are not seen for who they are, but as reflections of what men want, need, or fear. And this distortion does not only imprison women, it imprisons men in their own fantasies. Jung saw the feminine within every man as the anima, the unconscious image of woman that lives in his psyche. When a man meets a woman, he does not simply encounter her, he encounters his anima projected onto her. This projection can inspire him to grow, to create, to transform. But if he does not recognize it, he mistakes illusion for truth, and he chains himself to a shadow. Marcus Aurelius once advised, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not just, do not do it." The same applies to love. If it is not real, do not call it love. If it is only projection, recognize it for what it is, a shadow masquerading as passion. The task then is not to stop desiring, but to see clearly. To ask, do I love this person as they are, or do I love what they represent for me? To distinguish between connection and projection, between truth and shadow. Because real intimacy begins only when the illusion ends. Only when you strip away the projections can you finally meet the person in front of you, not as a mirror but as a soul. And in that moment, desire stops being an escape from the self. It becomes a path to the self, a mirror not of fantasy but of truth. At the heart of every relationship lies a hidden dynamic. It is rarely spoken, yet always felt. It is not love alone that binds us, but the subtle balance of power that shapes attraction, intimacy, and even obsession. Niccolò Machiavelli once wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Though he spoke of politics, the same principle runs through desire. Power, whether physical, emotional, or social, has always been intertwined with attraction. We are drawn to those who carry strength, authority, or control, even when we cannot explain why. Carl Jung offered a deeper lens into this truth. He believed the unconscious is constantly seeking balance, and that desire often emerges from the polarity of dominance and surrender. In his words, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking." Yet the paradox is that most relationships weave both together. Moments of tenderness alongside currents of control. Nietzsche once declared, "Where I found a living creature, there I found will to power." He argued that all life strives not merely to survive, but to expand, to assert, to dominate. Desire, then, is not just longing for connection. It is also the recognition of strength, the pull toward vitality, the hunger for intensity. Think about how attraction often works. It is not the agreeable, predictable figure who ignites obsession. It is the one who remains slightly out of reach, who exerts a subtle dominance by not being fully available. It is the one whose silence feels heavier than another's words, whose absence commands more attention than another's presence. Psychologists call this dynamic power asymmetry. When one person holds more perceived value, through confidence, mystery, or independence, the other invests more emotional energy. The imbalance creates tension, and tension fuels desire. Too much equality breeds comfort, but comfort can dull passion. It is the spark of imbalance that keeps desire alive. Carl Jung warned of the shadow at play in these dynamics. He noted that what we often seek in another is the part of ourselves we have repressed. This is why power dynamics can feel so magnetic. Dominance awakens our hidden longing for surrender, while submission awakens our hidden hunger for control. Neither role is inherently good or bad. They are mirrors of our unconscious. History illustrates this clearly. Kings and conquerors often surrounded themselves with admirers, not only for wealth or status, but because power itself was magnetic. Likewise, figures who resisted or defied power became objects of fascination, because their defiance revealed strength of another kind. Desire clings to power, whether it is expressed in authority or in rebellion against it. Marcus Aurelius once reflected, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The same holds true in love. When you no longer need to dominate or submit, when you stand whole in yourself, you stop being a pawn in the game of attraction. You become the one who shapes its terms. But most never reach this point. They are seduced by the dance of dominance and surrender, mistaking it for love. They chase strength in others because they have not yet owned it within themselves. And so, relationships become battlegrounds for unacknowledged shadows. The task, then, is not to eliminate power from desire, but to see it clearly. To ask, am I drawn to this person or to the power they hold over me? Do I love them as they are, or do I crave what they awaken in the parts of me I have denied? because real intimacy begins where illusion ends. When power is acknowledged, it can be balanced. When shadows are recognized, they can be integrated. And when both partners stand whole, desire no longer enslaves, it liberates. So remember this. Desire without awareness becomes domination. But desire with awareness becomes transformation. And in that transformation, power is no longer a chain. It becomes the fire that shapes love into something deeper, freer, and true. Not all influence announces itself. Some of the deepest forces in human life operate quietly, without words, without visible authority. This is the paradox of feminine power. It is often underestimated precisely because it is silent. Arthur Schopenhauer noted that what society dismisses as weakness is often a hidden strength. He wrote, "The wise have always said the same things, and fools, who are the majority, have always done just the opposite." In a world that values noise and dominance, silence is mistaken for submission. But silence, when chosen deliberately, can be the sharpest form of power. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." What he did not need to add is that transformation often happens without a single word being spoken. A glance, a pause, a withheld response. These subtle gestures often shape the emotional field more profoundly than speeches or commands. Nietzsche observed, "That which is done out of love is always beyond good and evil." Feminine power often works in this space, beyond rigid categories of strength and weakness. It does not dominate through force, but influences through presence, through emotional gravity, through what is not said but deeply felt. History is full of examples. Queens, consorts, and mothers who appeared powerless in public, yet steered kings, shaped heirs, and influenced nations in private. Their silence was not absence. It was strategy. It allowed them to guide without confrontation, to shape outcomes without drawing fire. Psychologists today call this soft power, the ability to influence not through commands, but through attraction, persuasion, and subtle shifts in perception. It is a power often dismissed in cultures obsessed with visibility. But as Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Soft power works precisely because it taps the unconscious. It shapes desires, directs attention, and alters decisions without ever announcing itself. Consider how silence works in relationships. When someone withdraws instead of arguing, their absence speaks louder than words. When someone pauses before answering, the pause carries weight. When a person refuses to explain, they become more mysterious, more magnetic. Silence creates space, and in that space the other reveals themselves. Marcus Aurelius once reflected, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Calm silence radiates strength because it shows restraint, control, and self-possession. In contrast, noise often betrays insecurity. Those who must always speak, always justify, always dominate are rarely in control, they are reacting. Feminine power lies not in the absence of voice, but in the mastery of timing. To know when to speak and when to withhold. To know when presence itself carries more weight than explanation. To let silence press on the other until they move, confess, or yield. This is why the most powerful influence is often invisible. We feel it without naming it. We obey it without knowing why. It does not argue, it shapes the ground on which the argument stands. So remember this. Silence is not weakness. It is leverage. It is not absence. It is presence distilled. And when wielded with intention, it becomes one of the most enduring forms of power, subtle, steady, undeniable. Every pursuit of power, every act of desire, Every struggle with obsession points toward the same truth. We are wrestling not with others, but with ourselves. The drama we play out in love, in dominance, in silence, in longing, is nothing more than the shadow asking to be seen. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is the final task. Not to deny desire, not to demonize power, but to integrate both. Because only through integration does freedom emerge. Arthur Schopenhauer believed much of human striving was driven by the blind force of will, a restless energy pushing us to seek, to crave, to dominate. But if we remain unconscious of this will, we are enslaved by it. We mistake compulsion for love, projection for intimacy, obsession for meaning. And so we suffer endlessly, caught in cycles we do not understand. Nietzsche offered a path forward: become who you are, not who the crowd wants you to be, not the mask you perform for acceptance, but the integrated self, the one who owns both light and shadow, desire and restraint, strength and vulnerability. To become whole is to transform power from manipulation into presence, from domination into freedom. Think of how most relationships collapse. They are battles of shadow against shadow. One projects need, the other projects control. One clings, the other withholds. Neither sees clearly, and so the cycle repeats. But when even one person dares to awaken, to say, "This is my shadow and I will not let it rule me," the cycle breaks. Carl Jung also wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is why so many believe they are unlucky in love, cursed in relationships, or doomed to repeat old patterns. It is not fate. It is unconsciousness, and unconsciousness ends the moment you turn to face it. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The same holds true in love and desire. When you master yourself, you are no longer a puppet to craving, nor a prisoner of projection. You can love without chains, desire without obsession, and hold power without abuse. This is freedom, not the freedom of endless indulgence, nor the freedom of domination, but the freedom of clarity, the freedom of wholeness, the freedom of standing fully in yourself, needing nothing from others to complete you. So what happens when we reach this state? Relationships cease to be games of power. They become spaces of truth. Desire ceases to enslave. It becomes fuel for creation, for connection, for growth. Power ceases to corrupt. It becomes presence, silent, steady, undeniable. The illusions fall away. We no longer mistake silence for weakness, or absence for indifference, or dominance for strength. We see clearly, and in seeing we are free. Carl Jung called this wholeness the greatest achievement of a lifetime. The privilege of a lifetime, he said, is to become who you truly are. And in becoming whole, you no longer seek completion in others. You meet them as equals, whole to whole, shadow to shadow, soul to soul. This is the end of the game, and the beginning of freedom.